Tales to Give You Goosebumps is extremely underrated within the Goosebumps franchise. Yeah, it just has to be said. Now, don't get me wrong, people like this series, but most of the time when people talk about the Goosebumps franchise, the same old type of book series get talked about, whether it's the OG 62, Series 2000, even some moderns are now getting attention because obviously they're moderns, House of Shivers. People are going back and rereading Goosebumps Horrorland, and that's getting some attention because technically that's not really a modern anymore. It came back in 2008, so even that's getting a little bit of dust on it. And I'd made a video before about why Give Yourself Goosebumps is the most underrated series in the franchise. And I still hold to that because Give Yourself Goosebumps are choose your own adventure books, game books. So a lot of people sometimes don't read them depending on whether they like them or not. But in this case, I really love Give Yourself Goosebumps because they go darker, they go crazier, and a lot more fun with the storylines than sometimes what you get in the mainstream books. You can check out my whole video on the topic, but yeah, Give Yourself Goosebumps goes a lot darker, a lot crazier. It's got fantastic villains in it. It's got fantastic storylines. Kids actually die. You play the kid. You die in some horrific ways throughout those books. But Tales to Give You Goosebumps are 6 books which consist of 10 short stories each, basically 60 short stories. And the show producers of the 90s show did adapt these, so it definitely got attention. But most of the time when you see conversations, people are not really talking about Tales to Give You Goosebumps. And sometimes it ends up getting a bad rep on being sometimes deemed as forgettable. People just sort of pick out some stories that they like, and then the other ones are just take out their one year, out the other. But I love the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series. A lot of the short stories, when they're good or great, they are some of the best story ideas you can get out there. You almost wish that RL Stine would have made full-length books out of them instead of giving us some of the mid to sometimes trash full-length books that he gave us throughout the franchise. And I'll talk a little bit about some of my favorites from the 4 Tales to Give You Goosebumps books I've read. I've not read the Halloween one, and the one which I think is like summer-based with Curly inside of the pool. I've not read those 2 yet, but I do plan on it. But the other 4, I got some favorites that I want to pick out of there and kind of highlight. And even some of the technically bad or forgettable stories in the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series are still fun and memorable and do better than some of the worst full-length novels in the series. So without further ado, let's highlight a little bit as to why this series is so great and really needs to be talked about more, also given some more respect. As I hinted, Tales to Give You Goosebumps is a series of 6 different books, all with their own kind of different themes. And overall, there's 10 short stories, 10 anthology short stories in each of them, which adds up to a total of 60. And these short stories sometimes end up being very fun, very creative, can even be scary and a little intense at points. You'd be shocked by some of the good quality content you can get in them. So just for example, let's start off at book number 2 of Tales to Give You Goosebumps, which was sort of camp themed, kind of loosely. And some of my favorite stories for there consist of Dr. Horror's House of Video. In Dr. Horror's House of Video, this short story is about a kid who's obsessed with monster and horror movies, and he ends up going to a VHS shop where there is a guy who's producing his own monster and horror movies, and then the kid unfortunately ends up finding out some of it's a little more than meets the eye. It's a little more real than he might have expected, and I'll leave it at that. But that was such a cool story idea. Of course, it has a little bit of a meta aspect with the horror movies, horror, kind of content, and then the whole monsters and VHS tapes. Obviously, as Goosebumps fans, a lot of us used to buy, for those who were alive during the 90s, you used to buy the VHS tapes back in the day. So there's a little meta aspect with that slightly. And also, if you're a fan of Universal Monsters and monster flicks and creature features like I am, this sort of speaks to you. It's a really cool idea with a guy who's making his own homemade VHS tapes, monster movies. It's almost like a kid-friendly version of like snuff tapes. You'll figure out more about that when you read the short story. But yeah, it's a really fun and really cool idea. And I almost definitely wish, as I do for a lot of the short stories I'll mention, that Stine would have made a full-length book out of it, because I think you could have expanded the short story into something even better, and a full-length book would have been fantastic. Probably one of my favorites without a doubt. Another great story from the book is in fact a camp themed one, and that's P.S. Don't Write Back. And P.S. Don't Write Back is about a kid who ends up being at this sort of like summer camp area, and usually they're used to getting letters from their family, their parents, but here he's getting letters from a unknown sort of sender. He doesn't know the address, doesn't recognize the handwriting, doesn't recognize what the hell they're talking about with him, and when he looks down, it's basically left to be kind of like, anonymous as to who it really is. And it just kind of hinted that this person lives or is a student that is within the camp nearby theirs. But when it comes to camps nearby them, there's no real talk about any camp being nearby them in the woods. And it says, don't write back. So it's almost like this person doesn't want to be caught by any of the counselors or people finding out, that there might be somebody out there in the woods. So it's very creepy, very ominous. It has that sort of strange mystery aspect to it. And once you solve the mystery, yeah, it gets dark. It gets pretty damn dark, and I was impressed by that. And it's another one that would make a fantastic full-length book. Definitely one of the more creepy camp stories out there, and I think that if it was made into a full-length book, people would find it as creepy as, something like, Camp Cold Lake or even Ghost Camp. So yeah, this is definitely a standout one. I'll also give a quick mention to The Cat's Tale, which I believe came out before Cry of the Cat. This short story predates it, if I'm correct, which means that it's sort of a prototype for Cry of the Cat. This one's about a cat that enters a girl's house and starts causing problems. So this one sort of served as a blueprint of Cry of the Cat, and even though there are some similarities, it is a little bit different, but I did enjoy this one. It's a creepy cat tale. There's plenty of those out there within the horror genre, but I think it deserved a shout out because eventually Cry of the Cat got made, and there's some parallels between these two. Next, you have Tales to Give You Goosebumps, book number 5, and this one had some good ones in it as well. One of them being The Haunted Guitar, which is about a kid who goes into a music shop that turned out to be burned to the ground. There was a terrible accident there, but he ends up getting this pristine guitar that he takes home and starts playing. But unfortunately, there's some things that are clinging to the guitar, clung from the store, and it's a pretty cool idea, pretty fun one, as the title kind of hints, and it's messed up towards the end, and definitely would have made a fun little episode. Kind of reminds me of Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, although not as elaborate and dark. It is still a pretty fun haunted musical story, and we don't have a lot of those out there outside of Piano Lessons. So yeah, this one would have been fun to see as a full-length book. You also have another story in the book, which is my favorite, which feels like a Twilight Zone episode, and it's called Tune In Tomorrow, about a girl who ends up, I think, moving into a new neighborhood, and she's sort of out of place, but she ends up watching cable TV all the time and ends up seeing this kind of soap opera drama channel where the things that happen in the soap opera are happening to her in real life. So every time she sees a different episode, that comes every single day, Tune In Tomorrow, the new episode's events start mimicking in her own life. And she almost is, drawn in to tune in because she realizes that whatever happens is going to happen to her. So she has to make sure, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? And when she tries to look up if the channel actually exists through some context, turns out this TV channel doesn't even exist. So it's really a Twilight Zone type of situation, and it gets kind of dark towards the end. There's some implications that, there might be multiple victims to this kind of thing, not just one. So yeah, pretty cool. There's also another story in there called Live Bait. Guys, if you're afraid of fish, you should go check out this one. It's a fishing story, involves some kids, and it gets quite dark. It kind of reminded me of a kid-friendly version of a story you would see in those Dead Bait books that I covered. For those of you who don't know, the Dead Bait adult horror short story collections I covered on my channel were all different stories involving fish, aquatic creatures, oceans, rivers, ponds, that kind of thing. This felt like a PG version of that, although still pretty horrifying if fish get under your skin. So yeah, should check out that one. And you also have another one of my favorites from this book number 5, which is What's Cooking, a absolutely amazing story, which I made a own separate video on. If you go check out the best I've read or watched, it's on there. What's Cooking is about a group of kids who have to go investigate a school with an urban legend of this crazy deranged lunch lady who used to, sever rats in half and used to have fingers inside of her lunch food, used to kill kids, chop them up and put them in the meat. And eventually she got taken away for being mentally ill and crazy. But then now there's the ghost of her, which is haunting the school after she died in prison or something. And yeah, this one's a real dark one. It's an urban legend one. It gets pretty gruesome. It gets pretty crazy. It is a paranormal slasher story with the urban legend aspect. It's amazing. This one definitely should be checked out by a lot of you, and it's one of the best Goosebumps stories out there, which you would not know if it existed unless you read and picked up Tales book number 5, because it never got adapted into an episode, which is criminal because it should have. Now, the budget probably would have been iffy on it, but I definitely think it would have been cool to see this at least turn into a full-length book or at least an episode adaptation. And if they stuck true to the material, that episode would have been quite haunting and quite horrific. Last book I want to cover is Tales book number 6, and the stories that I'm going to cover in this one are Why I Hate Jack Frost, The Double Dip Horror, and A Holly Jolly Holiday. So first with Why I Hate Jack Frost, this is a story about a kid who moves to Arizona. He misses his home state where there used to be real winter, real snow. Out in Arizona, it's all desert and scorching and hot. So he ends up going to a mall one day and gets this Christmas ornament that has Jack Frost inside of it, a little figurine and his little cabin in the woods. And every night that this kid starts going to sleep, he ends up getting transported to this pocket dimension in his dreams where Jack Frost lives with living snowmen and sleds and all these different winter activities. But every time the kid wakes up from these dreams, he ends up being extremely cold and extremely sick all the time, even though it's scorching hot outside. And eventually, towards the end, you figure out why the title is named as it is, as Jack Frost is quite a malicious figure, and this kid got lured into some bad things. The next story is called The Double Dip Horror. This is a paranormal story out at a snowboarding ski lodge where these pair of twins have to go and start tutoring kids, and they get some creepy vibes towards this lodge. And one of the kids that they're teaching ends up being quite rebellious and quite rambunctious, and he challenges them to a very difficult snowboarding match, and you find out some secrets. You find out some dark things and some reveals about this snowboarding lodge. So that's a fun one. And last one's called A Holly Jolly Holiday, about a girl with a family who's got Christmas fever. She ends up getting this VHS tape with a character called Susie Snowflake, who's very much a Dorothy kind of whimsical figure, big sort of Christmas mascot. And unfortunately, as the VHS tape continues to play on, her family's getting obsessed with watching it over and over again. And slowly but surely, Susie Snowflake starts manifesting in the real world, and her family start getting turned into duplicates, clones of Susie Snowflake in a sort of take over the world kind of thing. So yeah, pretty creepy. So those are all the stories that I wanted to cover in terms of some of my favorites from the books I've read. As you can tell, they're very fun, very creative, very cool. And even the stories which are sort of forgettable a lot of the time that people don't like as much, like A Werewolf's First Night, I think would have made a very fun episode, a very fun book, because it's about a kid who goes to a camp. Maybe the people in the camp turn out to be werewolves and there's a twist. You also got stories like Something Fishy, which, yeah, you know, that's sort of one of the bad stories out there, but I don't hate Something Fishy. It's about a kid who basically is playing around with his fish tank. He ends up turning small, a shrinking story, and gets trapped inside of the fish tank with the goldfish and stuff that he has in the aquarium. So that's a fun one, almost like mixing, I don't know, it's like mixing Beware of the Purple Peanut Butter or Adventures of Shrink Man with Deep Trouble. And that's a cool concept to me, you know. Even though it's a little messy and not the best, I still think at least the concept is fun. And I did have a little bit of a good time reading that one still. And you even got stories like Suckers, which is like if you took monster blood and made it into a short story. A little different because this is a creature which has like suckers on it like an octopus. But it functions kind of like monster blood and looks kind of like monster blood. So yeah. These books have a lot of cool stuff to them, a lot of fun things to them. Yeah, there's some bad stories in there which you're not going to be a fan of, but even the middling ones are still pretty fun and unique in terms of the concepts. They're definitely more memorable than a lot of the mid stuff you get in terms of full-length books. And the great stuff in these short story collections are fantastic. They're absolutely amazing. They're great. And I definitely think that they should have been full-length books rather than some of the stuff that we got. So Tales to Give You Goosebumps, if you can get your hands on it, you should read them, man. You know, they're short stories. You can grind through them quick. You get a wide variety of Stine's type of story writing. We don't know if these are ghost written or not. I don't really care. They mostly all feel like Goosebumps type of stories as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, they definitely deserve more respect. So in addition to Give Yourself Goosebumps being still my most underrated Goosebumps book series, this one particularly also deserves more love and respect. So for all of you out there, go back and start rereading Tales to Give You Goosebumps if you've not. And if you've not had the chance to read them for the first time. And let me know what your thoughts are down below. In fact, comment down below. What are your favorite stories from Tales to Give You Goosebumps? And what are your overall thoughts about the series? That's all I got for today. If you enjoyed this video, you support me by hitting that subscribe button, hitting that like button, commenting down below, and have a great day. Deuces.
You're in for a scare.